Time now for last call. Amazing video out of California where a sheriff's deputy traded gunfire with a suspect earlier this week, and it was all caught on her body cam. Watch this.
Shots fired, shots fired.
Authorities confirmed the man, Javier Hernandez Morales, was in the U.S. illegally and actually had been deported 3 times prior to 2011. He died at the scene. Immigration officials said the whole thing could have been prevented, but California's laws stopped them from arresting the Mexican despite his criminal past. That's all for us tonight. Be sure to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Justice with Judge Jeanine is next. And remember, I'm Waters, and this is my world.
Breaking tonight, Robert Mueller slams Paul Manafort in a sentencing memo made public today. Hello and welcome to Justice. I'm Katie Pavlich, in for Judge Jeanine Pirro. Thanks so much for being with us. A big show on deck with a great guest lineup, including former Governor Mike Huckabee, David Bossie, Katrina Pearson, Jason Chaffetz, and Charlie Kirk, to name a few. And a lot to cover tonight as President Trump prepares to head overseas to Vietnam for his second historic summit with North Korea's Kim Jong-un. The crisis in Venezuela intensifying, and Robert Mueller's sentencing memo on ex-Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort, is released. And joining me now with reaction to a lot of the breaking news tonight and more, Florida Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz. Congressman, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's good to be with you.
Welcome to the show. All right, so Paul Manafort is getting hammered by the special counsel again. They released the report today saying that he brazenly violated the law both outside of prison and inside of it. What is your reaction tonight to this new sentencing memo?
Well, when we receive the special counsel's report, I think it's very appropriate to evaluate it in context of how it was prepared and who prepared it. You'll remember that the Obama-appointed Democrat Inspector General said that all of the major HR policies had been violated at the FBI and Department of Justice when you saw people move from the Hillary Clinton investigation on to the Robert Mueller investigation. I think it's also important to note that when Peter Strzok and Lisa Page were texting one another about whether or not it would be a wise career move for Strzok to go and work for Bob Mueller, they said there was no there. There was no evidence at all after 10 months of investigating of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. And now we see, I think, a special counsel's team that includes a lot of people who were supportive of the Hillary Clinton campaign, who have supported Democrat candidates in the past. And as we look at the findings, we know that this is the result of tens of millions of dollars in taxpayer money that's been spent. But I believe it will take a very negative and unfair view of the president.
Oh, we're certainly waiting on that report, and we know now that it won't be released next week when the president is overseas. But I want to just point out that the sentencing memo talks about Paul Manafort violating a garden variety of crimes such as tax fraud, money laundering, obstruction of justice, and bank fraud. But there's nothing in here that talks about them worried about any kind of collusion, just as the indictment showed before he went through a trial.
You're absolutely right. And these elements with Paul Manafort largely arise either before Donald Trump ever contemplated running for president or so far after Paul Manafort's departure from the campaign that they couldn't be tied to the campaign. But you see these themes with Manafort play out with other characters throughout this entire saga, whether it be Roger Stone or George Papadopoulos. The process crimes are largely what drives the special counsel's activity rather than being able to demonstrate any Americans who were conspiring with Russians and the Trump campaign in order to impact the outcome of the election or to steal emails from Hillary Clinton and her team. So I think that you largely see the special counsel trying to investigate people like Manafort, like Stone, rather than actual crimes like collusion and obstruction of justice.
So speaking of investigations, your colleague, Congressman Adam Schiff, who is in charge now of the House Oversight Committee, was on Bill Maher last night, and I wanted you to take a listen to what he said, and I'll get your reaction.
People will stop me in the corridor, Republicans, and say, keep doing what you're doing.
Really?
Even senior Republicans, which of course would be heresy for them to say publicly, I don't need private confidences, misgivings anymore. We need public statements. We need people to take a stand. We need people to vote their conscience.
Congressman, are Republicans secretly meeting with Adam Schiff in the corners and halls of Capitol Hill to talk about how much they hate President Trump?
Well, there frankly are too many Republicans that I think haven't been vocal enough in support of our president. And I actually believe, Adam Schiff, that there probably are some Republicans who have talked to him and who have indicated that secretly they want a downfall of President Trump. But that's why I love our president so much. He's a disruptive force in Washington for the Republicans and Democrats who in large part work together in an establishment coalition to keep everything the same in this country. But the forgotten men and women of America wanted to see things done differently. That's why they elected Donald Trump. And now you see the establishment of both parties fighting back and allowing these abuses at the FBI and Department of Justice to bias an investigation that never will be able to prove collusion because it didn't happen.
So staying on Capitol Hill, we want to switch gears here a little bit. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is rounding up Democrats to vote for a resolution against President Trump's national emergency. Some Republicans have said they are going to break ranks and vote with them to condemn the national emergency. But my question for you is, does this resolution actually take any power back from the executive? And does it do anything to actually solve the problem of illegal immigration?
Well, this would be what we would call a show vote in Washington. It's a vote that won't result in any change to law or policy, but it allows Nancy Pelosi to virtue signal to the radical left about their open borders, abolish ICE agenda. I would be very disappointed to see Republicans break rank, but at the same time, I mean, we have to acknowledge that this is an emergency. We just seized enough fentanyl at the border to kill 115 million Americans. That's more than a third of our country. And that's just what we caught, Katie. There are enough drugs and gangs and violent people crossing our border to do great harm to the families in the United States of America. And that's why this is an emergency. It's why the president has taken appropriate action. And nothing about this vote will do anything other than signal to the far left of the Democratic base that Democrats still believe in open borders.
Does Congress have any plans? You're there, you're talking to your colleagues about doing something real on illegal immigration. We saw the funding bill, which actually fuels this problem of the crisis of unaccompanied minors and family units and human trafficking at the border. But we see the resolution condemning the president's emergency declaration. Are there really any plans over the next 2 years to tackle this issue from a strictly illegal immigration perspective, not tied to a funding bill?
Well, that is the question that all Americans are asking, Katie. They want to know, after all of this dust-up, are there going to be some common-sense solutions where both parties come together, maybe make a little compromise, and design an immigration system that works for the American economy and the American people? Now, I thought Senator Lindsey Graham was really working hard to do that. He was trying to build a piece of legislation that would have secured our border, built the wall, dealt with the dreamers in a way that was humane but that did not invite more illegal immigration, and then even take a look at those citizens in our country who are here from temporary protected status, people who escaped war or natural disaster, and to find a way for those folks to stay in our country if they follow the laws and if they act legally and properly. And so I think that there were people working on those things, but the barrier to the common sense reforms that most Americans would support is this, really I think, is this view on the left that we have to abolish ICE. Beto O'Rourke saying we have to tear down walls. That's the type of thing that really frustrates common sense progress.
Congressman, real quickly before we have to move on and let you go, you brought to the attention of the American people recently something that House Democrats in the Oversight Committee actually voted against in terms of notifying ICE when illegal immigrants or illegal aliens attempt to purchase guns at American gun stores. Can you quickly explain what that was about?
Yeah, Democrats wanted to expand background checks, and we were working on the elements of that legislation that we liked and didn't. And we simply thought that if an illegal alien goes to buy a gun in this country, that we should notify ICE if the background check shows that. And every single Democrat on the Judiciary Committee voted against notifying ICE when an illegal alien wants to buy a gun to potentially do harm in our country. So it shows that, like, they hate ICE so much on the radical left that they wouldn't even notify ICE if an illegal alien would potentially commit a mass act of gun violence.
That's pretty amazing. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. We appreciate it. Congressman Matt Gaetz, thanks so much.
Thank you, Katie.
All right, joining me now with more reaction to all of the developing news and more, Trump 2020 senior advisor Katrina Pearson and former Trump deputy campaign manager David Bossie. Thanks to you both for being here tonight. Katrina, I want to start with you. President Trump won in part in 2016 because of his strong stance on the border, on national security, and the rule of law when it comes to illegal immigration. This is not going away. How do you feel this is going to play when it comes to 2020?
Well, you know, Katie, you're absolutely right. And I'll just piggyback off of what Representative Gates said about, you know, the messaging that Nancy Pelosi is sending by wanting to somehow stop the emergency action. But I'll take it a step further and say, you know, Nancy calls herself a masterful legislator. This is a messaging resolution, not just to Democrats, though, but also to Republicans who still have not gotten the memo that you just spoke about, who still are not in touch with the base, and get them on the record, because she wants to add to her majority in the House, and they want to take back some seats in the Senate. And it's all on this false narrative that there's a manufactured crisis, when just 2 months ago they were all talking about the crisis we had on the border as the caravan was trying to rush through. There are more on the way. We were just in El Paso, Katie, and I spoke to several citizens who did not support President Trump and who did not support the wall, who all do not want the wall to come down in El Paso. And furthermore, they were dead silent when I asked them why their neighbors just 20 minutes from them did not deserve the same silence.
David, you know, the left for the last 2 years has run and legislated, and they will continue to legislate with Nancy Pelosi in charge on this resistance movement. Nancy Pelosi was in Laredo yesterday saying that the president is abusing his office and disrespecting the presidency by declaring this national emergency. She's now deciding that she's going to put this resolution on the floor. What does this say to you when it comes to actually getting something done on this issue?
Well, they're clearly not interested in getting anything done. This is a show vote, nothing more, nothing less. It does not mean anything except we get to put people on the record, which I appreciate, because in 2020, when we go to reelect President Trump, we're going to be reelecting Republicans and Democrats, and people who vote on the wrong side of this issue are going to be, in danger when it comes to 2020. So I'm excited about this vote. I want to see Republicans, if there are any, and I want to see the Democrats put their money where their mouth is.
All right, I want to switch gears to the news that we got tonight from the Robert Mueller investigation. They have this new sentencing memo for him. We're not going to get that report next week, as previously reported multiple times that this report was coming down. But Katrina, what does this have to do with the president's strategy moving forward if the Robert Mueller investigation doesn't end anytime soon before 2020?
Well, look, I mean, the president has already stated, and many of us agree, that this is essentially the greatest hoax on the American public. I mean, you have a guy that has unfettered power, unfettered access to funds. I do hope they include the amount of tax dollars that it costs once this report does come out. But the president is not concerned about this, Katie, because it has nothing to do with him. It has nothing to do with the campaign strategy. Donald Trump won this election. The left hates it. We are definitely in the age of hoaxes, apparently, all against Trump and Trump supporters. So, again, the left is going to have egg on their face when this report comes out, and the president once again will be vindicated. But this is not the first hoax, and I'm pretty sure this will not be the last. I just hope that people start to pay a script writer, because not even Denzel could pull off some of the latest hoaxes we see out there.
Well, Denzel is a good actor, as we know. David, keep laughing
Exactly.
over there. What's your response?
No, he is a good actor. Look, this is outrageous. Our president is going to Vietnam to negotiate a nuclear deal or an opportunity to make a deal with Kim Jong-un of North Korea, something that the world needs to have happen. This president is going over there to negotiate on behalf of all the American people. It's outrageous that Robert Mueller has not submitted this report and closed it down, because the president doesn't deserve to go to this summit with this hanging over his head. This should be behind us, behind all Americans, and the president should be able to do his job every day without worrying about this really ridiculous now charade of an investigation.
Katrina, it's been interesting to see how the narrative has changed with the Mueller investigation. So Democrats and some Republicans Republicans have gone to great lengths to protect the special counsel. They wanted legislation put on the Senate floor to protect the special counsel. Anytime the president or his supporters questioned Robert Mueller's motives or the people working for him, they were depicted as people who weren't interested in the truth. And now that Robert Mueller doesn't seem to be finding the collusion that Adam Schiff, for example, wants, they're now questioning the credibility and legitimacy of the Robert Mueller investigation and launching their own investigations with subpoenas ready to go.
Well, of course they are. They have to have some type of conspiracy or hoax to continue throughout the election cycle. Leader Kevin McCarthy, tweeted several questions that he has for Adam Schiff, who has been claiming since the beginning that he has evidence of collusion, which, by the way, is not a crime. But here we are again today, several months, probably 2 years now, into this nightmare of a hoax on the American people. But I do think also that this investigation, we'll see just how thorough it was, because we also know that there was a campaign that was in fact colluding with foreign entities, right, and a lot of people involved in the previous administration who were in an act of sedition, if you want my opinion on it. And I think that's what needs to come out of this investigation, too. If you're going to investigate collusion, let's investigate collusion and get on with it.
David, going into the 2020 election, obviously there's going to be a big primary between Democrats. But is this going to be an issue that they try to use against the president, or are they going to realize it's the bottom of the list when it comes to people's priorities, and they want results from the government? They don't want to talk about something that didn't happen.
That's exactly right. This president's going to be able to run on all of his unbelievably successful accomplishments that he's been able to succeed on for the American people, all the American people, unemployment rates, GDP, our national security. But you have the Adam Schiffs of the world. You have the Jerry Nadlers of the world. You have Nancy Pelosi and others in the House that want to have a never-ending investigation. And the American people are tired of it. They want to get back to business. And that is what's important here. We're going to have a little bit of overreach, in my opinion. Congress is going to be able to see for themselves what the American people say. But Democrats in Congress are overreaching. They're going to be in danger. Once this Mueller report comes in, they're going to, if they continue on this path, the boomerang effect is going to be there, and it's going to benefit President Trump, and he's going to be more successful in 2020 for their overreach.
All right. Well, we appreciate you both coming on tonight. Thank you so much, Katrina Pearson and David Bossie. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Well, coming up, will an ISIS bride's attempts to be allowed back into the U.S. succeed? The latest details in this shocking story you need to hear still ahead. Plus, Bernie Sanders raises nearly $6 million in 24 hours. Will socialism pave the way to the White House for the Democrats in 2020? But first, new reaction to the crisis unfolding in Venezuela. Governor Mike Huckabee is here and ready to weigh in next. You won't want to miss it. Justice is back in just a moment. Developing tonight, violent clashes in Venezuela amid a standoff over humanitarian aid. Thousands of protesters take to the streets as tensions reach a crisis level in the country. Here with reaction to that and much more, former governor and Fox News contributor Mike Huckabee joins me now. Governor, Nicolas Maduro today cut ties with Colombia. His thugs in Venezuela have been burning aid trucks with medicine and food that are trying to come into the country on the Colombian border. The White House obviously is watching this very closely. Former Ambassador John Bolton and National Security Advisor John Bolton tweeting, "These 4 Venezuelan military members chose to stand with the people today. We were honored by their commander-in-chief, Juan Guaido, and welcomed by the democratic world. The rest of the Venezuelan military should follow." What he's referring to is that there are now defections from the military, which has been backing Nicolas Maduro at this point. They are now on the side of the president of the United States, and democracies across the world are recognizing Juan Guaido. What is your response to the developments in Venezuela today?
Well, Katie, first of all, it's another collapse of socialism and a reminder that it doesn't work. And ultimately, we see yet another rich nation turned into an impoverished nation because of socialism and corruption. You have to add that in. But we also see what a strong U.S. policy does. Even Jeb Bush today tweeted out commendation for President Trump's handling of the Venezuelan situation. And Jeb is no big supporter of President Trump, so I think that's very significant. But it's a very honest assessment. this wouldn't be happening if it weren't for the very strong policies toward freedom and encouraging the people of Venezuela to take charge. And now we're seeing these defections. Katie, it is a seminal event there, and it looks like it's unraveling in Venezuela against the regime.
But as we've seen, Juan Guaido, who again is recognized by the United States and other democracies across the world, he's on the front lines at the border in Colombia trying to push this aid through as Nicolas Maduro continues to fire live ammunition at protesters and volunteers who are trying to distribute this aid. And yet we have politicians, some running for president in the United States, Bernie Sanders, saying, condemning Maduro in some way, but not saying that he should go. What is your response to that?
Well, Bernie Sanders has never met a communist he didn't love. I mean, he did his honeymoon in the Soviet Union back in the day. This is a guy who has been captured on video over the past 40 years of praising Fidel Castro, praising every communist leader, and often at the expense of the United States. I'd like to think that there are sane and rational Democrats who recognize that Bernie Sanders cannot represent their views and the views of Americans and the views of traditional Democrats who find those ideas utterly repulsive.
Well, Bernie Sanders, of course, upheld Venezuela as an example of how socialism works. And now that it's completely fallen apart as a result of socialism, he doesn't really want to talk about it. What do you think the outcome is going to be here from a national security perspective for the United States? Because it is getting very violent. Maduro doesn't seem like he's going to go. There are defections from the military there, but it's a very serious, violent situation that could get much worse.
I think ultimately there will be a takeover of Venezuela, if you will, an uprising that will lead to the ousting of Maduro, because the people have seen their lives totally collapse. Their economy is in the toilet. They don't want to live like this. They know what it was like when they had freedom, and now they know what it's like under socialism, and they're rejecting it. They're doing the same thing that people around the world have done, and they're doing it at great expense and at great risk to themselves and their families, which show you the desperation of people who, having tasted freedom, want to enjoy it yet again. And I hope that people will recognize that we're blessed to live in the United States, and frankly, we're very fortunate to have a president who doesn't just walk away and turn a blind eye to the horrors that are going on in the socialist Venezuela, and is supplying help and assistance to try to get that freedom back for the people there.
All right, Governor Mike Huckabee, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
You bet. Good to talk to you, Katie.
All right, Charlie Kirk and Jason Chaffetz still on deck tonight. And next, Bernie Sanders brings his socialist message into the 2020 campaign. Will the second time be a charm? And is he a threat to President Trump? We'll discuss with tonight's political panel next on Justice. Back in a moment.
This equipment was blamed for starting some of the deadliest and most destructive wildfires in California history. The company says it can't afford the $130 million in performance bonuses it was expected to hand out. More than 90 people have died after drinking tainted alcohol in India. It's the second mass outbreak of alcohol poisoning there in 2 weeks. Police say they've linked these latest deaths to a batch of home-brewed booze laced with methanol. More than 200 others have been hospitalized. Local media reports a dozen people have been arrested. I'm Anita Vogel. Now back to Justice with Judge Jeanine.
Well, are Democrats ready to feel the burn again? Bernie Sanders jumping into the 2020 pool this week, raising almost $6 million in the first 24 hours of his campaign. So is socialism the ticket for Democrats to beat Trump? Let's ask my political panel. Conservative columnist Stephanie Hamill joins me, along with Democratic strategist Antoine Seawright. So, Antoine, can you tell me the difference between a Democrat socialist, and a socialist?
Well, I don't know the technical definition for any of those things, but I can tell you this. The independent senator from Vermont has entered himself into the Democratic primary, but I'll tell you what I told your colleague Harris a few days ago. He has the same math problem he had in 2016. If not, it's probably worse. This is the first time we've had a record number of women, a record number of African-American candidates running, and we have some strong candidates on the ticket. And if you look at places like South Carolina, who will ultimately decide our nominee, many of the Democrats here in South Carolina have rejected the idea of Bernie Sanders and some of his policies and positions. I think this socialism buzzword used by the right is because they want to make America scared again because they have no agenda to put forth for the 2020 election.
Well, Bernie Sanders has classified himself as a socialist, and many on the left Democratic ticket have also done the same thing, calling themselves Democratic Socialists. But Stephanie, Antoine mentions a series of credible, good candidates on the left. We have some of them up on the screen here. You have Tulsi Gabbard, Julian Castro, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, Klobuchar just got in there, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. Do you think that they're really underestimating Bernie Sanders in the Democrat establishment, considering how much money he raised? And he's, I think, a little bit upset that his socialist policies have kind of been hijacked, and he's not really getting much credit for it out on the campaign trail.
Absolutely. We see a lot of these candidates that are using and recycling the senator's campaign platform from 2016. And it is very significant that he was able to raise $6 million in 24 hours. If you look at the next candidate, which would be Senator Kamala Harris of California, she only raised about $1 million. And if you look at Senator Elizabeth Warren, she only raised $300,000 in the 24 hours. So we should definitely look at this, but we shouldn't read too much into it because it's so early. We don't know who officially is all going to run. We're still waiting to hear if former Vice President Joe Biden's going to get in the race. As we've seen, Joe Biden and Senator Bernie Sanders seem to be the favorite, which is kind of ironic because the Democratic Party is the party of diversity and they're for women and people of color. Right. Yet their two frontrunners, Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, are older white men.
Antoine, do you want to respond to that?
Okay, Kate. Yeah, Kate and Stephanie, let's be clear. The heart and soul of the Democratic Party are African-American voters. If you guys think that Bernie Sanders will get more votes or receive more popularity when it's all said and done than two African-American candidates or any of the other candidates on the ticket who are declared Democrats, then you all are drinking too much of your own
So
Kool-Aid.
are you arguing that Democrats are going to be voting on race, not on policy?
No, I never said that. What I said is what I was repeating the point that Stephanie made, that the heart and soul of this Democratic Party are African Americans. That is the way to the nomination. I don't see in any scenario in which they choose Bernie Sanders.
You mentioned math, and you're right that Bernie Sanders does have a math problem when it comes to his socialist policies wants to implement. You mentioned also South Carolina when it comes to the Electoral College. If it's not Bernie Sanders with a path, then who is it? Because there are so many candidates who are trying to define themselves right now, and they keep playing into this identity politics, which isn't really about policy. Who is the one who can beat Trump?
Well, that's yet to be determined because, as you said, it's very early in this process.
Well,
it's very early in this process. And keep in mind, this time in 2007, not many people knew who Barack Obama was, and very few people on the outside thought he could win the nomination. So here we are now talking about him serving 2 historic terms. So it's very early in this process. What I will tell you is that during the Democratic primary, South Carolina picks nominees, and this will be no different.
Stephanie, Bernie Sanders, I'll let you respond, but just to be clear, Bernie Sanders has grassroots support. His donations of the $6 million that came in less than 24 hours were from over 200,000 people, and the average was $27 per person donating. So he still does have a grasp on the grassroots movement on the left side of the political line.
I want to get Stephanie in 2016.
Stephanie, go ahead.
So he does have that, but I think we're going to start to see that fizzle out. If you look at what happened in 2016, Bernie Sanders was the anti-Hillary Clinton candidate. So they were looking for anyone else. Now we have all of these other candidates that are using his platform on the same thing, universal health care, open borders, you name it. And I wanted to answer.
That's not true.
No, it is true. It is true. That's what all of the favorite candidates right now are running on that, which is very dangerous. And it's not going to resonate with the American people, the working class, the poor. And as you mentioned, Antoine, Bernie Sanders does have a problem with women voters, with minority voters. They're not going to come out to support him. And I wanted to answer your other question, which was which one of these candidates could beat President Trump? No one. You look at what's going on with the campaign. This is a well-oiled machine. They've been raising money since President Trump took office. This is 2 years in the making. They've raised over $100 million. They have some $20 million in the bank. Mm-hmm. They have all of their ducks in a row. And also, if you look at what happened, the RNC passed a resolution that they would fully support President Trump in 2020. So we're not going to see this divided, vicious primary that we're going to see on the Democratic side. And Katie, as a political junkie, I know you are too.
Right.
This is going to be very entertaining for us to sit back and watch, and I'm going to definitely be getting out the popcorn.
It's going to be very fun to watch, that's for sure. But Antoine, before we go, I want to ask you, the left trying to determine themselves and get out in front of this very crowded field when it comes to 2020, they're playing very, very heavily into identity politics. We saw them take the bait on Jussie Smollett, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker just got into that. Now they don't really want to talk about it. Do they risk damaging their credibility when it comes to jumping into identity politics and using it as a weapon, not just against Republicans, but inside of a Democratic primary?
Well, I can tell you what I shared with all of the candidates who I've been in contact with. I told them to stay laser focused on policy and a policy agenda that will really solve some of the major problems we've had for a very long time, and point to the failures we've seen from this president and the Republicans in control of the Senate and formerly the Congress right now. And so I don't think we need to get off on a tangent and get distracted away from policy issues. And that's been my message. That's going to continue to be my message to the ones who reach out to me.
Stephanie, quick last word to you.
I think it's important to note what's going on in Venezuela. That is the socialist paradise gone wrong, and now it's in the news and we're talking about it. So Bernie Sanders and all of these other Democrats can promise all of this free stuff, but then we're seeing what actually happens if we were to go that route.
We're not going to turn into Venezuela, Stephanie. Let's
you
not
never
scare
know.
people.
You
We're
never
not
know.
going to turn into Venezuela.
Is that Bernie Sanders?
You're trying to make America scared again.
No. Is that Bernie Sanders has a long history of praising Venezuela, praising Russia. Now that Venezuela is collapsing, he doesn't want to explain why the socialism doesn't work there.
Venezuela was once a very rich country.
So it was a rich country, absolutely. We'll have more on that later in the show. Stephanie Hamill, Antoine Seawright, we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, coming up, Nancy Pelosi might be looking to put up a wall of her own, this time between Trump and, well, his wall. Charlie Kirk joins me next to discuss whether the Democrats' desperate attempts to stop the wall will work. Back in a moment.
14 plus every story every 15 minutes. Fox News headlines 24/7 channel 115.
House Democrats taking the first steps Friday in a bid to stop the president's national emergency declaration to build the border wall. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she'll bring the resolution for a vote Tuesday, while also having this to say. Take a listen.
The promise was that Mexico was going to pay for it. So it was it's declaring, the President of the United States is declaring a national emergency to honor an applause line in a rally. Not only is he disrespecting the Congress, the legislative branch, and the Constitution of the United States, he is dishonoring the office in which he serves.
Joining me now with reaction to Speaker Pelosi's comments and the continuing border wall fight, Turning Point USA founder and president Charlie Kirk. Charlie, great to see you.
Great to see you, Katie. Thank you.
So Nancy Pelosi is now arguing that the president is dishonoring his office by declaring this national emergency. What is your response to that?
Well, he's doing the exact opposite. He's fixing a bipartisan failure of the last 40 years where both parties refused to actually secure the southern border. This is well within his constitutional authority to be able to declare a national emergency where there's an extended need. And look, the way I view it is no different than any other national emergency declarations that presidents have done in the past, where there is a pressing need that is affecting the citizens of our country, and he has it within his authority to be able to solve that problem. And the porous southern border, this is something you and I have talked about so much, Katie, is having real impact on Americans, whether it be the amount of fentanyl that is coming across the southern border, or guns, or drugs. And what's most concerning also is the amount of children that are trafficked across the southern border. We don't talk enough about that. Right. And this is his constitutional ability and authority to secure the southern border. And look, he's also, I mean, I'll totally challenge what Speaker Pelosi said. He is the promise keeper in chief. This is something he promised on the campaign trail. He went to Congress and got some startup funding for it, and now is using the 1970s era emergency declaration authority to be able to secure the southern border once and for all. Charlie, maybe you could help me wrestle with this question, but you know, Democrats and Republicans were for a wall/a fence in 2006 with the 2006 Fence Act. Chuck Schumer, Dick Durbin, even Barack Obama were on the Senate floor complaining that it actually wasn't enough fencing to secure the southern border. Barack Obama deployed National Guard troops. President Trump is sending 1,000 more troops next week. What has changed now that the president is taking this situation a step further and taking it a little more seriously, and yet here we are with all of this opposition? Such an insightful question. Two things that I'm able to pinpoint on this. The first of which, President Trump stole the base of the Democrat Party away from them, which is working class voters in the Midwest. So the Democrats have a serious political issue. And the only way they're going to try to make up for it is to try to continue the illegal immigration problem, which they turn and they demagogue into a political issue. And they misrepresent it totally and make Republicans seem as if they're anti-immigration. And the second thing is just this hatred for Donald Trump. They simply oppose things just because the president is for them. And in short, they truly hate President Trump more than they want what's best for America. And it seems as if no matter what he poses, no matter what he puts forth, they're immediately and instantaneously and automatically in opposition of it. So those are the two main things. Right. And a real applause for President Trump be able to really change the political makeup of this country and win states that Republicans hadn't won in 20 or 30 years. That's what I attribute the change in the illegal immigration debate towards in these recent couple of years.
Charlie, I want to switch gears a little bit here. You talked about hatred. You're in charge of Turning Point USA. You have a bunch of chapters all across the country. There was an incident at UC Berkeley. I want to play the video and then get your response.
Oh,
All right, so that was one of your recruiters, correct, who was allegedly punched in the face by someone who disagrees with him. Can you tell us what happened leading up to that moment? Was there something that prompted this? Was there a confrontation prior to this video that was shot? What was going on here?
Yeah, so we were just made aware of this a couple of days ago, where we were doing an activism recruiting event at the University of California, Berkeley, with our Turning Point USA chapter, just peacefully trying to recruit students. And we understand we're going to be in the ideological minority at UC Berkeley, but that doesn't mean you can't try and you can't keep on trying to grow your presence. And one of our activists there was met with physical confrontation, actually sucker punched right in the jaw there. And this is an unfortunate example of how violent the left has become. And put simply, the left hates the idea that there are other ideas. And, you know, fighting on college campuses, we understand we're going to be in the ideological minority, but we never thought that we'd be met with physical confrontation and violence. It's a sad thing that this happened, but make a little bit news. I will be there next week, and we'll see what will happen. And we're going to keep it very peaceful, and I hope UC Berkeley does as well.
Well, be safe, and we hope that the police do their job as well. Charlie Kirk, thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie. Thanks.
All right, coming up, an ISIS bride banned from returning to the United States. Former Congressman Jason Chaffetz is on deck to help break down this complicated story. Next. President Trump is standing his ground, refusing to allow an ISIS bride back into the country. Former Congressman and Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz joins me now to talk about it. So, Congressman, the attorneys for this woman who joined ISIS 5 years ago, went over to Syria, tweeted about killing innocents through the use of jihad. Her lawyers are saying that President Trump is the one who is denying her birthright citizenship. But it was actually the Obama administration in 2016 that analyzed it and said that she doesn't actually have any kind of claim to birthright citizenship. Where are we on this story?
Well, she doesn't because her father was a diplomat. We don't recognize them as U.S. citizens. And she made the elective choice to go from, you know, she was born in New Jersey, but she was in Alabama. And she got on a plane at her own volition and she went to Turkey. And then she ended up, next thing we know, she's fighting with ISIS and tweeting back to the United States for people to drive-by shootings. She advocated putting people in trucks and running them over on 4th of July and Memorial Day. I mean, this is a sick individual. She's been married a couple of times. She now has this 18-month-old that I read about. And she wants to come back to the United States, but she shouldn't come back to the United States. The president and Secretary Pompeo are exactly right. She should stay exactly where she is.
So her attorneys, who are part of the Council on Islamic Relations, which also has ties to terrorism, are arguing that the United States has an obligation to take her back and that she could maybe help us out by going through therapy and talking to people about how not to become radicalized, and that could be her debt to society. What's your response to that?
Yeah, I don't want to pay for that. I don't think anybody who's watching this program or lives in any part of this country should have to pay for that. If we want to put her at Guantanamo Bay, go ahead. But I'm not going to put her in Tampa Bay or some other place in the United States and have this burden placed upon them for a conscious decision that she made to fight for the most radical group I can think of on the face of the planet, and as an adult, advocate the killing of Americans. Right. There's no way they should do this. Good luck with this case. There isn't a group in the United States of of America that's going to support her coming back home, coming back to the United States.
CARE does. But moving forward on this and getting a little perspective on how we deal with this issue, she is not an American, according to the Obama administration in their analysis of it. But there are a number of Americans who did go to Syria, a number of Europeans who went to Syria, and these people are now trying to come home. We still have Guantanamo Bay, but how do we deal with this issue, especially lawmakers on Capitol Hill?
Well, citizenship does matter, and you deal with U.S. citizens differently than you do enemy combatants who maybe come from all different parts of the world. That's why Guantanamo Bay is so important. But again, in this case, the ruling came down that she was not a United States citizen given her father's diplomatic status at the time that she was born, and I see no reason to bend on what the Obama administration ruling that they made.
Yeah, I just find it interesting that they're trying to portray her as someone who is regretful of her decisions. She left 5 years ago. She's back here 5 years. She wants to come back 5 years now, later, after the caliphate has been crushed by the Trump administration. The timing seems to be a little suspicious. Last word, real quickly.
She was quoted as saying that they were literally eating grass. Well, go ahead and keep eating that grass, because when you advocate killing Americans and you fight for ISIS, we don't need you here in the United States of America.
All right. Congressman Jason Chaffetz, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.